Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. How are we doing? Good. Day two. Sorry to miss yesterday, but I'm glad to be here to talk to you all today. My name's Daniel Funke. I'm a reporter for the International Fact-Checking Network at the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. We're based in Florida in the United States. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about misinformation, what it is, what it isn't, how we can combat it, and why all of that matters. So first off, you're probably wondering who I am. Again, my name's Daniel. I graduated from the University of Georgia in the United States about 2 years ago with a journalism degree and an international relations degree. So I'm pretty new to this. I'm a new journalist. I've been doing misinformation work for literally the entirety of my professional career, which hasn't been that long. And then after that, I worked for the Google News Lab. They give out fellowships to recent college grads to go and work for journalism nonprofits in the US with the goal of making them better. So I reported on the media industry as a beat over the summer. I covered layoffs, the New York Times, stuff like that, what was going on in the media industry. So that was a lot of fun. And then over the summer, Poynter got a big grant to expand its international fact-checking network, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And they hired a reporter to cover fact-checking and misinformation as its own beat, which was becoming really important. Obviously, misinformation proliferated during all these elections around the world, and I figured I'd stay. I loved Poynter. I loved reporting on the media, as meta and weird as that is. So yeah, I stayed on at Poynter. And you're probably wondering what Poynter is. You know, in the US, it's really obvious what Poynter is, but abroad, sometimes people don't know. It is a nonprofit journalism institute with the goal of making journalists better at their jobs. Think of it as like a professional development training center. We bring journalists from around the world to Poynter in Florida to teach them how to be better editors, reporters, managers, and leaders. And we also cover journalism as its own beat. So that's what I do. I cover fact-checking, misinformation, and all that kind of good stuff for our website, poynter.org. And yeah, and we also train journalists online at NewsU. So if you ever want to learn how to do one thing in the journalism industry, we probably have a webinar for you. So that's Poynter. And you're probably wondering what the International Fact-Checking Network is. So that's a subsidiary of Poynter. It's its own little project. And we do a lot of things, but first off, we build fact-checkers around the world. We build them up. We help them start their own projects. And you might not know, but there are more than 150 independent fact-checking projects around the world. So you probably heard of PolitiFact. It's probably the best known fact-checking site in the world. They were started in 2007 to fact-check politics in the US. And basically what they do is they will take something a politician or someone says, and they will determine whether or not that claim is true or false based on evidence that they get from either official sources or by talking to experts. So we help these projects start, and we share best practices. We train and inform them on poynter.org. So I write about them. I will do webinars and go do teaching in person, stuff like this I find very fun. We'll also give out grants to fact checkers around the world. And this is a photo from the Global Fact Checking Summit. It's a conference that we host every single year in a different city around the world. And we had more than 250 fact checkers come last year, which is really cool. And they came from more than 30 countries. So this is a growing industry, right? You've probably all seen misinformation in your news feeds. And these journalists are the primary defense against that type of fakery. So today we're going to talk about misinformation, what it is. We're going to go through some definitions. I promise that's more fun than it sounds. Why it matters. I like to couch everything in why it actually matters. And then how we can fight it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about fact-checking, and it's not only isolated to journalists that do this full-time, right? We can all be fact-checkers, and I'll teach you how. I'll give you some tools. So hopefully I can fit that in 20 minutes. We'll see. So first off, what it is. I stole both of these graphics from firstdraft.org. First Draft News is another nonprofit in the US that studies misinformation. If you like what you hear today, go check them out. They do great work. So first off, let's get the elephant out of the room. Fake news is not a great term to describe this phenomenon. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's been politicized. And misinformation is so robust in a lot of different formats that it's not really helpful in isolating what we're talking about. So this isolates misinformation into, or what Claire Wordle at First Draft calls information disorder, into 3 different categories. So I say misinformation, that's stuff that's false, demonstrably false content, and it doesn't imply any intent there. So you're not really sure why the sharer is making this stuff up. It could just be to create chaos, or it could be for some other reason, but it doesn't imply intent. On the other side, disinformation does imply intent. So that's just demonstrably false content that is trying to achieve a goal, right? So that could be to sway elections, it could be to get someone to share something, it could be just to make money from advertising revenue on your website, but there's an intent there. There's a reason you're pushing that out. And then finally, there's malinformation. That's stuff like hate speech, harassment, targeted harassment of journalists online, and stuff like that. So it might include elements of false information, might include elements of misinformation, but it's not necessarily always false. It could just be bad content, right? And then within mis and disinformation, there are several different types of what we're talking about. So there's satire and parody, which we all like to think people understand satire. They really don't. People always mistake satire for real news. It's sad, but it really demonstrates the problem that we're facing. There's imposter content, misleading content. There are a ton of different types of misinformation. So just remember this chart, keep it in your mind when we're talking about misinformation. I'm talking about all of this stuff. So the first one, I'm gonna go through a couple examples today. They're by no means like the only ways that misinformation travels, but these are the biggest that I see on a day-to-day basis. So the first off are hoaxes. So first things first, fake news isn't new. It's been around forever. This image on the left is from a New York City tabloid in the 1800s that published this story claiming that on the surface of the moon, there are tons of like aliens and bat people and like just random flying creatures, right? And this is a newspaper. They printed it, they distributed it, and the goal was to make more money. So really misinformation has been around for a really long time. It's not even isolated to the internet. It just has become easier to publish misinformation now that we have social media and anyone can be a news purveyor. So it has been around forever, from the tabloids all the way till now, those fake news stories that we see online. So that's a hoax. That's something that's made up. The goal, we're not really sure, but that's what's going on there. Then there are manipulated photos. These are photos that are photoshopped, and they're trying to make it look like they're real, right? So on the left, you have a hurricane image from Hurricane Irma in the United States a couple years ago. And it was saying that it was gonna go and hit Houston again. This is right after Hurricane Harvey devastated Texas in the US. And there was a real concern that this hurricane was gonna hit the same area. This is a completely made up photo. It was stolen from the National Weather Service. Someone altered it really easily in Photoshop to make it look like it was going there. And then the one on the right, that's a rainstorm in China that someone just put an octopus on to make it look like it was raining octopuses. That didn't happen, right? That was just a joke. But these are done really easily in Photoshop, and the goals there could be just to like have a good laugh, or it could be to cause panic, right? So that's manipulated photos. Then there are deep fakes. I'm not gonna talk a lot about deep fakes. You've probably heard a lot about them already. I will just say that they are videos that leverage artificial intelligence to make it look like someone is saying or doing something that they actually didn't. And this technology is pretty new. It started about a year and a half ago when this Reddit user called Deepfake developed this technology that basically takes a bunch of photos of someone's face and overlays them on a video. And this makes it look, this is actually on the right, a call out from BuzzFeed News. Go look it up later if you haven't seen it yet. Where they hired Jordan Peele to talk like Obama and make up a bunch of stuff, and it looks like Obama's saying it, but it's actually Jordan Peele. And that you can see a little bit about how that works on the left with that image of Steve Buscemi on top of Jennifer Lawrence's face. So I will say that this is really hard to do. My project, the IFCN, tried to make a deepfake. It took us a week. It was really hard, and it wasn't even a good deepfake, right? You have to have a lot of power, computing power, to do this. So this is a concern, but I will say we're about 5 years off from deepfakes becoming a really big part of the misinformation ecosystem, because it's a lot easier to publish a fake news headline and get a ton of clicks and make a lot of money than it is to make an artificially intelligent video, right? That takes forever. So that's misinformation, and it might sound funny, right? Fake news is kind of funny, it's weird, it's like this internet culture thing, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more about why it matters. So first off, this stuff is everywhere. Literally on every platform, in every culture and context in the world. It is a fake news story about health on Facebook. It is a Twitter thread about the Catalonian referendum. And it is rumors on WhatsApp in India about police brutality. This stuff happens everywhere. It is not just one thing. So just by that, we need to care about this because there's false information in every context in the world. And it can become a real life attack. It's not just weird hoaxes that are trying to make you laugh. Misinformation can lead to lynchings of innocent people in India, and it can lead to the plight of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. So tech platforms enable this kind of information to spread, and then it harms real people in the process. It can also cause panic. So I was talking about that hurricane hoax earlier. It might sound kind of like funny, right? Someone photoshopped a hurricane photo and put it on Twitter. But if you live in that place, you might evacuate. You might call all your friends and family and tell them to get out. It might completely alter your life if you live there. So misinformation isn't just something that people share on Twitter and you like shake your head and say they're stupid. It could actually hurt people. And also, falsehoods have consequences. When a falsehood is repeated over and over again, people will believe it more than if it was just debunked or no one ever said it, right? So take this for example. When Donald Trump, the President of the United States, said that he won the Electoral College in a landslide, fact checkers debunked this a lot. They said, no, he didn't win the Electoral College. He didn't win the popular vote in a landslide. But still 47% of registered Republicans believe this claim. Even though journalists have covered it a lot, it's something that Trump has said over and over again. So when a falsehood's repeated, you start to believe it more. That's a problem, obviously. So misinformation matters. We know it matters. It's a problem. How can we fight it? I work for the International Fact-Checking Network, so I'm going to talk about fact-checking. I'm a journalist, born and bred. So I think journalism is the primary way we can fight bad information online. And when I say fact-checking, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things that are ex post. That's just a fancy word for when something's already out there in the public sphere. So take for example, if I say a claim right now. It's already out here, everyone heard me, there are a lot of people here, that's out there. That's after something has been said. So that's a discrete claim that can be fact-checked against primary evidence. That's fact-checking. Then there is verification. This is before anything makes it out into the public sphere. This often pops up with user-generated content. So when your news organization gets a video or a photo from someone claiming to witness something, that's just a one-to-one interaction. They sent you something, you're not sure if it's real, you need to verify if it's real before you promote it and put it out there into the public sphere. That's your job as a journalist. So there's a difference there, right? Journalists and fact-checkers do verification, but not everyone is doing fact-checking. And then somewhere in the middle you have debunking. That's pretty much when you try to debunk a fake news story, a hoax, a rumor on social media. That can be when it's already out there in the public sphere and everyone knows it's happening, or that can be before it even happens, before it even takes off, right? So it can be either a verification or a fact check. And there's a consideration there, right? You don't want to amplify false narratives and conspiracy theories if no one's going to see them. You want to make sure that a lot of people have already seen this key piece of misinformation before you put it out there, because again, when you repeat a falsehood, more people believe it. So you have to be a responsible journalist there. And this is the basic methodology. So you got to find a claim, right? This sounds basic, but it's like the hardest part of being a fact checker. You got to find a good claim that a lot of people either are believing or could believe in the future, and you have to isolate that and dissect it and make sure that it's actually fact checkable. That's stuff like, not opinions. If I say the US is the best country in the world, that's an opinion, right? You can't fact check that. There's no credible evidence to give you a conclusion there. So you have to make sure that someone's making a factual statement. Then you have to check it. You actually have to find key sources that will help you lead to a conclusion, right? So often this looks like government data. It looks like nonprofit data, something that's collected objectively and reliably and independently that you know is true. It's not going to be, like a blog. It's not going to be Wikipedia, although Wikipedia is really helpful for a lot of things. It's going to be something objective. And then finally, you're going to correct it, right? So this could either look like an article that fact checkers publish a lot, or it could be a tweet if you're just a journalist that wants to be a good citizen, or it could just be not publishing anything at all if you're verifying something. That's just as important. If you find something to be false, you don't publish that, right? So yeah, that's the basic methodology. Keep that in your mind when we talk about fact checking. Again, why does fact checking matter? I think a lot of people, especially since falsehoods, when they're repeated where people believe them, think that, why should we even call them out? I have a lot of evidence to convince you that fact-checking matters, but I'm just going to go through 2 cases. So the first one comes from Africa Check, this great fact-checking organization based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And they fact-checked a claim that was actually published in the World Health Organization, right? This is the claim that in sub-Saharan Africa, 50% of births occur during adolescence. Sounds like a big number, a really big number. And the World Health Organization said it. But Africa Check said, something didn't really smell right here. This doesn't really reign true with what we know to be true from that region. And they fact-checked it, and they told the World Health Organization it was false, that actually 11% is the real number. And they told the World Health Organization, and they changed the report. That's cool, right? This fact-checking organization where 8 people work, and they're a nonprofit, got the World Health Organization to change their number, which is what researchers use, journalists use, government officials use. So when fact-checkers find something to be false, institutions will change their data. That's really important. It's also important because fact-checking can change people's minds about a specific claim. So this is from a study that was done at Northeastern University in Boston in the United States. And it found that when people are presented with a fact check about a specific claim, a political claim, they will change their mind about that specific claim, but they won't change their mind about the candidate or the party it's about. So this is a fancy chart. Just look there. I just want you to look at that one point. So before that point, the point before, is when misinformation is introduced to somebody. So that's when a fake news story about Trump was shown to both liberals and conservatives. So they saw the story, and the higher up the point is, the more they believed it. And then when the fact check was introduced is the next point. That's where the gray circle is. So when everybody was introduced to the fact check, Republicans and Democrats believed that hoax less. That is really important, right? When fact checks work, when they are correcting misinformation. But they're not perfect, because literally 1 week later, people started to forget the fact check. That's where that falsehood repetition comes in. The more you hear something, the more you're going to believe it, even if it's false. But it can work. Fact-checking can work. But the study also found that it's not going to change people's minds about a political party or a person. So, Trump voters were less likely to believe that hoax about him, but they still said, hey, I'm going to go vote for Trump because I like him. I don't care if he's wrong about this one thing. And I would argue that's not necessarily the job of journalists or fact-checkers, is to change people's minds about political parties. It's just to change people's minds about falsehoods, right? And that's clearly what's working. So fact-checking matters for that reason. It also matters because it's just relevant, right? So we have started working with platforms, big tech platforms around the world, to try and limit the spread of misinformation on those platforms. We all know Facebook is a big purveyor of fake news, right? So after the 2016 US presidential election, the IFCN, the project that I work for, partnered with Facebook to decrease the reach of misinformation. How do we do that? We have 50 fact checkers that are signatories of our code of principles, and that's stuff like transparency of funding, transparency of methodology, just basically good principles that all fact checkers and journalists should be using to be more credible. And Facebook said, hey, we like the standard that you've employed. We're going to take fact checkers that you've certified as trustworthy, and we're going to let them have access to our back end. So fact checkers have access to a dashboard where users have reported potentially false information, and then a fact checker will fact check that specific piece of misinformation. And if it's found to be false, it'll decrease the reach of that single hoax in the newsfeed by up to 80%. So that's a really big deal. Facebook gave fact checkers access to their platform to decrease misinformation. That's really cool. They identified that journalists are a key part of this. Google has also relied on fact checkers to surface credible information. So when you search any kind of government statistic or a news story, Google has said we're going to surface fact checks higher up in search results. They altered their algorithm to make sure that fact checkers are appearing higher. That's really cool too. And we're only going to do more of this. We've talked to WhatsApp, we've talked to Twitter, and we're going to make sure that these platforms are cooperating with journalists to make more responsible decisions about misinformation. And finally, I'm going to tell you guys what you can do. This is what fact checkers are doing, but I like to give you all tools and tips that you can use and take away to your own newsrooms, because that's why you're here. So the first thing you can do is just verify images and videos. You guys probably know how to fact check stories and facts, because you're journalists, but verifying images and videos is a little harder. So remember these two tools, InVid in RevEye. These are two Chrome extensions or browser extensions where you can right-click on an image or video and search the internet for it and find out if it's false through that way. So if you search the internet for an image and it appears in the New York Times as a different context, you know that image is false if the original context wasn't that one. So check those out. Those are great. Then there's authenticity. Just check that a website is actually who it claims to be. If it's a .co, it's probably not reliable. Investigate your sources. This is whois.com. You can see who owns a website. And then geolocation. So you can use tools like SunCalc to see, what SunCalc does is you can click on a position at a certain period in time, and it'll show you the shadows. So if you analyze the shadows of a video or a photo, you can tell when and where it was taken, and that might disprove the original context. So yeah, those are just a few tools for you. I know I'm out of time. So talk to me afterward. If you love this stuff, if you're interested, you want to know more, even if you just want more tools, I have a huge Google Doc that I can share with you. So yeah, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.